Welcome to our sermon podcast for wanderers, seekers, and thinkers, for deconstructing and reconstructing. This is a feed of Open Door Church, a faith community focused on God's love and grace, a progressive church built around action, community, and people. We've got a guest speaker with us this week, so enjoy a fresh perspective and check back often as we're posting new content every week.
Grace and peace to you, siblings, through Christ. It's one of the oldest phrases used in salutation in the Christian movement. Grace and peace. That's what we're going to be talking a little bit about this morning. We're doing things a little bit differently this morning. As you've probably noticed by now, I'm a little bit less bearded than the face you usually see up here by this point in the morning. And in fact, I want to take a moment to just kind of reflect on the face that we usually see here this morning. Bradley and Jenna are just such an incredible gift to our community. Bradley is an incredibly gifted pastor, from his ability to wear multiple hats, his technical savvy, his natural aptitudes, his theological integrity and depth, his spiritual wisdom, his intentional and ongoing introspection, and the commitment that he has to ongoing reformation and justice. And he undergirds all of this with love, and that ability to have so much to offer from one person is really a rarity and really a gift. On top of all of his regular duties, he, along with Jenna and the board, and with you as a community, has navigated this COVID crisis with exceptional sensitivity and wisdom. And he has done all of this without any real time off. And Nathan and Aaron also are behind the scenes doing so much work. Developing curriculum, putting together a library, pushing buttons to make things work, pulling in pieces, organizing music and communion thoughts, and recording children's messages, and all of this with no real break. And Jenna, I'm deliberately overlooking, choosing not to talk about what you bring to the table, because there's so much baggage around what a pastor's wife is meant to be. And you bring so much to the table, but not because of a duty or responsibility, but because it's who you are. And we are so, so blessed to have you, all of you in our community. So on behalf of the Open Door community, thank you so much for all that you're doing and continuing to do, and for persisting in this season. There's so many others who are doing so much, but I know that it's a particular burden to pastor a church through a crisis, week after week, with no real break. So thank you. And if you're watching at home, please hit like or love or that hug emoji, which I guess means care. Just show your love and agreement and let the love flow in. So back to grace and peace, which I would posit we never actually departed from, even with my unannounced detour. Bradley's probably a little bit choked about. Sorry. In keeping with doing things a little bit differently, I really wanted to invite participation in the comment section today. It's not something we never do. We've done it before, but it's also not something we do every week, where we ask specific questions to have responses in the comments. And whether you're watching this on Sunday morning live or later during the day or the week, I still invite you to comment, because we are going to be gathering up all these different thoughts, and they will inform what we do next week. So please hit your comments in there and make sure that your voice is heard. And the very first thing that I want to do is ask for your participation. I want to know what comes to mind when you hear the phrase grace and peace. You can treat it as a phrase, or you can separate it out and tell me what the word grace brings to mind, or what the word peace brings to mind, or of course the phrase grace and peace. Let me know. Throw that in the comments. Gut reactions here, we're not looking for your understanding of the etymology of the word. I just want to know, what is the gut reaction when you hear this word? What is your first impression when you hear these words? I apologize in advance if I am coughing a lot. I can usually pause and have my coughing fit off screen, but I'm trying to use some new technology this morning that will help mitigate background noise, but unfortunately, it means that any coughing I do is live. I cannot pause this recording, so I have my water, but I apologize in advance. Moving on. One of the truly beautiful things about Open Door is that we are a collection of individuals with a dramatically diverse history of church engagement. We have people from the Church of Christ tradition, Lutheran backgrounds, Reformation backgrounds, Presbyterians, Methodists, Pentecostals, Baptists, Anglicans, Catholics, no church background at all. And we are intentionally inclusive in our community, and I think that draws a lot of us together. And we draw, as a community, with great intentionality and joy from the richness of all of these experiences and traditions, while carefully working to avoid marrying ourselves to the frameworks of these traditions that deliver these rich gifts. This is a community that seeks to elevate the voices of the often overlooked, the voices of peoples whose voices are often made to fall silent. And so we listen to each other through the cracks in our voices as our voices crack with emotions or cough, as the case may be. Beneath the heaviness carried in the baggage of perceived rejection due to the very real experiences thereof, we embrace with charity the stories of wounding and redemption, the working of justice and mercy, God's work, whether it's done in the framework and institutions of religion or recovered from those very same places. And this beautiful ethos, which gives birth to 1,000 new actions, holds space for 1,000,000 mistaken perceptions and seeks, through it all, truth, wrapped in the love of an incarnation. This ethos allows a woman who is wounded like me, a woman who should be despised in another era or area, a woman whose voice should be silenced because I've been divorced. Worse still, I've been remarried. Worse, perhaps, than all of that, I have opinions and passions, and I dare to speak them in the presence of men. A woman whose mental health and frailties and traumas and scars, whose lens is so scratched from the etching in of the question, who do you think you are, that I cannot see straight without the saving grace of the Holy Spirit working through me. A woman whose conventional wisdom says should be silent in the church. Conventional is not always wise. But this ethos offers a woman like me the opportunity to speak. And so I thank you for this opportunity as I offer to you with humility and gratitude a word or two from what's been stirring in my heart. I would argue that these ethos and actions are very much the embodiment of grace and peace. Although I suppose if I'm making an argument, team positive self-talk, you have 90 seconds to come up with a rebuttal. And that right there was a casual plug for games night. You should come. Seriously, Nathan Bonnie, you should come. So Paul, a guy credited with writing a lot of letters, many of which are canonized in the New Testament of the Bible, he opens a lot of his letters with this phrase, with this greeting, grace and peace to you. He inherited this language from Christ himself, who would often say, peace be with you, or my peace I leave with you. But because of Paul's profound love for and understanding of the relationship with the law, he has added grace to this salutation, and I will circle back to that. In his letter to the Galatians, Paul opens, after citing his relationship with Christ and the Galatians, I greet you with the great words, grace and peace. We know the meaning of these words. And I want to ask, do we? My really dear friend posed this question yesterday as we were discussing this passage. How much do we know the meaning of these words? For many of us who were raised in the church, these words were uttered on a regular basis. We were often exhorted to pass the peace to one another, a tradition that dates back as far as the earliest recordings of church history. But like many things that become habit, how easy has it become for us to look past the depth and richness of these words and simply think of them as a sort of weird and antiquated way of saying, "Hey, how are ya?" in church language, dressing it up nicely, without really pausing and seeing the person whom we are greeting or considering the words that we are really saying. As I mentioned, Paul wrote a lot of letters, but I chose Galatians this morning for a reason that I hope will become evident. As you may have picked up over the past few weeks, we are in the season of Epiphany. The season starts 12 days after Christmas, on the day of Epiphany, and continues all the way until Ash Wednesday, which this year is February 17th. And it's a season in the liturgical calendar of striving to reflect on and internalize the truth that the incarnation, which is the gift of the divine, smashing into and infusing earth with its presence, of God choosing to be Emmanuel, God with us, of reconciliation and restoration, and hope and beauty, and love and joy and peace and light. Epiphany is the season in which we strive to remember that this gift, this incarnation, is not just for us to hoard up and build walls around and protect. No, it's in fact a gift to break down walls and shatter divisions and release captives. It is a gift that we receive so that we can gift. It is a season of recognizing that we are called to be blessed, to receive that blessing, so that we in turn can be a blessing, to bless others. While the early church was grappling very much with this reality, Jews were the people, the setting into which Jesus entered. Jewish customs and laws were the things which Christ first spoke to. Up until this point in history, Jews were the incarnation of God. They were the revealed people who were charged with being blessed to be a blessing, who were revealing the heart and will of God. But they were not the only people to whom Christ had come. As we remember in recognizing the arrival of the wise men on the day that marks the beginning of the season of Epiphany. The wise men came from the east, which means they did not come from within Israel. Among the very first to become aware of the birth of Christ were traditionally outsiders. And in the letter to the Galatians, we see a picture of Paul fired up and passionate about the problem of trying to make religion an ethnic or national thing. Paul speaks frankly about his need to put Peter in line for trying to make the Gentiles conform to Jewish customs in order to receive the fullness of Christ. In Galatians, we see Paul furiously tearing down the walls that are being built to divide those who may receive the blessing from those who may not. Walls that are being built along lines of ethnicity and nationality. Kind of sounds to me like a country that we may have some awareness of today. The season of Epiphany this year is interestingly intertwined with an historic season on the global political sphere. This week we also watched some amazing events transpire. As history was made in the inauguration of President Joe Biden and the first ever female Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. And as Bernie Sanders made history for his casual indifference to pomp and circumstance, which he has arguably earned through a lifetime of commitment to political action and justice. And just when I was worried that this impressive man was going to be relegated to a mitten meme, he throws the meme on a sweatshirt that immediately sells out and donates the proceeds to Meals on Wheels. We also heard on this amazing, historic January 20th morning, one of the best sermons of our day, delivered through a masterfully crafted and spoken poem by the youngest poet laureate ever to speak at an inauguration. Amanda Gorman offered words that capture the essence of truth, of the gospel, even while they are words spoken to a country in a time of strife and division. The parallels I read between her poem and Paul's exhortation to the Galatians to refuse to be divided over trivial things and to fight for the things that truly matter, for inclusion and to be the blessing. These parallels are beautiful and staggering. Amanda Gorman spoke at a presidential inauguration, yes, and in a different context, I may be harangued for daring to separate out the national pride in her poem, but the conceptual ideology of how to receive a beautiful but broken thing, such as a fractured country or a perverted faith, these are concepts that ring truer than concepts that can be restricted only to a matter of national pride. In Amanda Gorman, we hear Christ speak. We hear echoes of the divine, of incarnation. We see the Christ in her as she echoes the language of the Psalms. Listen. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and that norms and notions of what just is isn't always just is. And she carries on, and if you haven't watched a video of her incredible recitation of this fantastic poem that she wrote, I so strongly encourage you to. Dare to imagine her poem with the word faith when you hear the word country this morning. I refuse to misquote her words. I don't think that's fair to her. But I do want to remind us that these concepts that she's speaking of are bigger than one country. So she carries on, casting a vision of hope that takes honest account of the pain that we bring to the present. As she says, yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried. I'm skipping a bit here and sharing this beautiful and true sentence that has already been made into beautiful pieces of art, as it struck true for so many. It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. And of course, in this line too, I would posit that the concept is transferable, that being anything that has tradition associated with it is more than a pride that we inherit and is fraught with a past that needs to be repaired. And truly with our faith, that repairing is a restorative process and a redemptive work that we are invited to participate in. Paul is a man who knows what it is to bring a past with him. He knows it well. For those remembering that I would circle back, this is that moment I am circling back. You see, Paul was always a passionate fellow, even when he was still going by Saul. He was so passionate about the law. He knew what it meant to follow the law perfectly. He, like many teachers of the law, knew that the only way to hasten the coming of the Messiah was to keep the law perfectly. And now, here were these Christians running around trying to let non-Jews into the fold, trying to say that the law was fulfilled and abolished, and basically encouraging all manner of law-breaking from Paul's perspective. And Paul, who still was then Saul, loved God too much to let this blasphemy continue. So, in the name of God, he chose to put an end to these Christians. And one day, he had his deconstruction moment. There's an awesome kids show I watched with McKenna a while back. It's called She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. Not the 80s version, it's a newer reimagining of it. And in the first episode, spoiler alert, give you a second if you want to mute. In the first episode, the protagonist has this earth-shattering moment where she realizes the thing she'd been fighting and training for all her life, the thing she thought was the good guys, was actually perpetuating the harm that she was perpetuating the harm. And many of us have had this tumultuous epiphany moment with our own church upbringing. And if you are here, well, there's a better than good chance that it is because you are refusing to throw the baby Jesus out with the bathwater. You and I, like Paul, and like virtually every story we see of someone who encountered Christ, have had a recognition moment, or moments, or years, where the earth has shifted under our feet, where we have realized that this isn't about that. And sometimes this is the antithesis of that. And maybe this was actually all wrong. Or maybe just part of it. For Paul, that moment was the road to Damascus. He rode down that road as Saul, a warrior for the one true God, the God who could never have been Christ. And in this moment, on the road to Damascus, God shows up and he asks Saul, "Why are you hurting me?" And Saul sees in Christ the divine, and he is undone. The very thing he was so passionate about was the thing keeping him from truth. This earth-shattering moment was so significant. He changed his name, and he changed course of his life from fiercely protecting the law to advocating for freedom from the law. This shift wasn't overnight. I mean, it was in a pretty big way. Like, he's knocked off his horse, he goes blind, who knows what happens in these next moments. Scholars suggest that it took him somewhere between 3 and 12 years after that moment to begin his ministry. And in his ministry, in addition to greeting one another with peace, which had become the norm from Jesus, and was probably the norm before that, Paul adds grace. But you see, in his context, grace was anything but a gentle forbearance of one another's quirks or even wrongdoing. Grace was a radical, daring, political, subversive act. It was a defiance of being bound by law, and instead an embrace of a freedom that was so threatening to power and to culture, because grace had no room for division. Grace had no room for political norms. Grace said we are free from the law, free from condemnation, and if we're free from those things, what tools are left to control us? Peace, or shalom, as I mentioned before, is often referred to as the created order, and to bring peace is to bring restoration back to that created order. To bring peace, as Amanda Gorman says in the opening lines of her poem, quiet isn't always peace, and peace isn't always quiet. To restore what is broken and what is lost is not a meek process. It's powerful. It takes courage. It unsettles powers of oppression. It undoes injustice. Grace and peace are anything but meek and mild, or even particularly comforting words. These are words that dare us, like Amanda Gorman dared us in the closing words of her poem, like the season of Epiphany dares us, like Christ dares us to be the light. When we share these words with one another, we are declaring the inclusive freedom of Christ for all to be restored to the created order. When we share these words with one another, we are not only wishing that their lives be filled with grace and peace, we are reminding ourselves that we are to be agents of bringing grace and peace to this world, and we are exhorting one another to be agents of bringing that grace and peace to this world. So as we close this morning, I want to encourage you to consider, with specificity, where you might wish grace and peace in another's life. If you were to text someone this morning and wish them grace and peace, what might you say? For example, there are a few of us in here to whom I would say, may you experience the grace of knowing that you are not bound by the guilt and shame that you have had etched into your subconscious through the lies that you have been told. You are free from that condemnation and shame. May you know that grace, and may you know the peace of the deep knowledge that you were created by a God who loves you, who desires for you to know love, to experience love, to share love, that you were created intentionally by a God who celebrates with you, laughs with you, and cries with you. Consider what you might share. And I also want to invite you to share in the comments today an experience of recognition where you have seen that shift or had that shift in your moment. That moment of shifting in your life where you've seen something that is not right. Or where you've seen dividing lines erected, maybe in church, in community, in family, in country. And if you're bold enough to share these thoughts in the comments, please, please do. I invite you to. In Galatians, in Amanda Gorman's poetry, in the person of Christ, and in so many other places, we see that grace and peace means tearing down the dividing lines, refusing to acquiesce to false notions of ethnic or national religion or division. Grace and peace takes the passive sentiment of thoughts and prayers and replaces it with the active movement of freedom and justice. They are lived prayers that we offer on behalf of and with one another. Finally, I challenge you to pass the peace to each other this morning. Take some time after we close, while we have that thanks for joining screen up, before you come to our Zoom coffee bar, which you are going to come to, please. Send a message or a text to one or two other people, meaningfully wishing them grace and peace. And to all of you, may you experience grace and peace in this moment, in this week, and in the weeks to come. May you experience the grace that is ours through Christ, of knowing that we are not subject to law, but invited into freedom. Guilt and condemnation have no say. May you dance in that freedom as you bring it to others, and may the depth of peace of reclaiming shalom, of restoring the created order by seeing and naming the divinity within all of creation, which means when you look in the mirror, when you gaze at your child, when you stroke a pet, when you smell a flower, when you inhale the sunset, may this peace wrap around you with the embrace of the Christ that has incarnated this world and inhabits all of her creation, and indeed inhabits you. Amen.
Thanks for listening to this sermon podcast from Open Door Church. Our intro and outro music was created by Lee Rosevear and is used under a Creative Commons by attribution license. Have a great week. Ask the hard questions and explore God's love. Everyone is always welcome to join the journey with us at Open Door. Learn more at opendoorfamily.ca. That's opendoorfamily.ca.